Good reminder. Thank you. It's interesting. We're reading that in our youth class. We just read that this morning. That promise that comes from that song that comes from. I'm just going to read it. It's not where we are this morning, but I want to just take a moment. It's a very good text. In Isaiah 43, it says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you." Isn't that a good promise for us this morning? It's interesting, though. He doesn't say you will not go through fire. He does say you will not be burned. So you might say, "Wow, but I thought the Lord was good and He's going to protect you." He is. Well, you might go through some fire, but you won't be burned. The test comes when you're in the fire and you have belief and faith that you won't be burned. Some people, when they touch the fire, they immediately get out. Maybe, just maybe, Jesus is in the fire with you. Something to think about. That's a free one, by the way. That's a free one for you. You might want to write that one down. That might just be what you need this week. Yeah, you can bring up the slide. I think that's a cool picture. We are continuing our study on the life of David. Not the book of David, but on David. I don't know if that's accurate, what he looks like, but it represents so much for us. It represents so much for us, this story on the life of David. Last week, we started, this is going to be a long time, so if you missed last week or you missed this week, you're here, but if you missed any of the weeks, check out our YouTube page and they'll all be on there so you can get one long story. We are not going to be able to cover every single verse, so I pray that each one of you has already read 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings. I know you've read most of the Psalms. I hope that you'll at least maybe give that a try sometime because we can't do it all. But last week, we were introduced to Samuel. Samuel as the prophet, one of the last judges, who's not going to be king. We were introduced to Saul, who became king and who is the king, the first king in the line of all kings for God's chosen people. So that happened. Saul, who is now king, was rejected by God just 3 chapters into his reign. He's been rejected by God. We were lastly introduced to our little boy, David, you might remember, who is tending to sheep out in the field. Kind of like that little field there. He is out of the room tending to sheep, and then he is chosen to be anointed to someday become king. Someday to become king. But not today, but someday to become king. And immediately when that happens, the king, who is actually Saul at the time, the Spirit of the Lord immediately departs from Saul the second that David is anointed to be king, who is chosen by God. God takes away his spirit from someone who has now been rejected by him. Sometimes it happens at the same time, and that's what happens in 1 Samuel chapter 16, where we left off last week. It even says that the Lord, when he leaves Saul, who is the king, who has been rejected, as we talked about last week, when he takes away his spirit, he doesn't leave him without a spirit. The Lord puts a distressing spirit upon Saul. Did you ever wonder? The Lord can actually put a spirit on you that is actually not very helpful. It's in 1 Samuel 16, verse 14. The Lord puts a distressing spirit upon and in the heart of Saul. Why? Because if you have been rejected by God, and God has rejected you, you're going to know that God has rejected you. So he puts a spirit of distress on Saul, because he says, you might be king, but you're not going to be king forever. And he puts a distressing spirit upon him. And Saul, not knowing that David has been anointed to take his place, seeks all throughout the land to find someone to calm his distressed spirit. Saul didn't know that the distressing spirit was from the Lord, but he says, I need someone to soothe my spirit. I need help. He goes all throughout the land, and as the story would go, funny enough, it's David who has been anointed to take his place someday and has received the Spirit of the Lord as the Spirit has left him. And David, man, he is a musician. His little harp, not a big one that he can carry by hand, soothes King Saul. And the word tells us that the only time that the spirit of distress would be soothed and calmed in his heart and mind is when David would play to him. Some of you, that might be, maybe not from David, but music might be the only thing that calms your soul or your heart sometimes. If that's you, you can kind of resonate with King Saul. But that's what happened with Saul. And Saul, unknowingly, it says then, from this point forward, things get a little tricky in this story, and I think it gets a lot more exciting. Where we leave off for this week to start is 1 Samuel 16, verse 21. He says this. This is not where we're going to be, but I'm going to read it to you. So David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. There's love there. There's a relationship there. Although, is it going to last long? We'll find out. And if you've read this story before, you know what's going to happen. But these two that are fated to be together are now together. The Lord has brought them to one another. Saul is distressed, serving wrongly as king. David's anointed to be king, heir to the throne in a way, but Saul doesn't know this. Saul loves David greatly and depends on him to calm his distressed spirit. This could be a great relationship, but we will see how it goes when we get in the way of things. And I will remind you, that which God does not approve of will not last long, and it certainly will not last forever. If God has chosen someone to be removed from something, a position, power, leadership, God will make it known, and God will step in. But as we left off last week, David was anointed that day, and how long would it be before he becomes king? Years and years and years. So you might have the favor and the blessing of the Lord, but it might not have come to fruition in the way that you had wanted yet. And so with that, I want us to turn to 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17. And we're going to go through a lot of the word today, so I pray that you are ready. Your phones, Bibles, iPads, whatever you have. 1 Samuel chapter 17. To the most popular passage of Scripture, probably in history. It's one that more non-Christians know. It is so popular. 1 Samuel 17. But I think and I pray the Lord has revealed some things to me that I believe will hopefully be new about this passage that maybe you have not heard or thought of before about 1 Samuel 17. David and Goliath. So we're in 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we're just going to start in verse 1 because let's get some background to what's going on here. And we're just going to read quite a while, and we'll stop eventually. 1 Samuel 17, verse 1, and the word of the Lord reads as such. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle and were gathered at Soka, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soka and Azekah in Ephes-dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah. Drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. They were faced off. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels. And a shield bearer went before him. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. We will surrender. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." A winner takes all battle. It's like racing for pink slips. You get my car or I get yours. You get my nation or we get yours. A lot on the table here. And the Philistine said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. That's his dad, who had 8 sons, David the youngest. And the man was old, advanced in years in the days of Saul, meaning just during the time that Saul was reigning as king. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had gone to follow Saul to the battle. The names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, remember that one, the oldest. Next to him, Abinadab, and the 3rd Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul, but David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. And this is where we are this morning. The stage is set, the battle is set, the armies are looking at each other. 40 days pass while Goliath goes unchallenged, untouched, standing as a dominant foe. Something like that, maybe even in their minds, because they were all afraid. You'll notice even Saul was afraid, the king, which, if you might remember, there was one or two things that they prayed for about a king in 1 Samuel chapter 8. They only asked for two things. Before that, they didn't have kings, but they noticed every other nation had kings. But they asked specifically for two things. They said, one, give us a king who will rule us. They got that. Someone who rules over it and tells them what to do. And the second one was, a king is someone who goes before us in battle, fights our battles, and wins. They wanted two things. They wanted to be ruled, and they wanted someone to be victorious for them. And their very first king is afraid of the very first battle that they come to, according to 1 Samuel. Well, that's interesting. That worked out well for them, did it not? He's afraid of the very first battle that comes their way. And so, we are now at our story for this morning. Let us see what David gets himself into as Goliath stands in the way. Verse 17, 1 Samuel 17, verse 17. Then Jesse said to his son David, take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp. And carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and see how your brothers fare, and bring back news of them. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. Battle is raging. Battle is happening. The battle is there, but Goliath is out, ready. See, because if it all can be solved by 1-to-1, that would be great. If they can solve the whole war and they don't have to sacrifice so many lives, that's a pretty good system. It happened once in a while. Send your best warrior and our best warrior, and we'll just decide the whole battle based on them. Doesn't sound like they all really want to fight all that much. But hey, if there's one who's really powerful or really good, maybe they can solve things together. For us, one of the things I asked you is we always talk about King David, King David, King David. And the other pictures that you might look up in history, not just the statue of David, which is one of the greatest things ever created by man, for the creativity that God bestowed upon us. If you've never seen it, I've never seen it in person. But it is nevertheless extremely beautiful from what I have seen. But paintings and art that you might have seen that reenact or depict David slaying Goliath. You know, you've seen maybe little plays, you might have seen a movie or a stage production, or just in your mind you've pictured what it might look like for David to slay Goliath. Many times, the many songs. But David, not just slaying Goliath, David was a little shepherd boy. He was a shepherd. He tended to the sheep out in the field. And as we talked about last week, what is he doing at the start of this passage before he gets the opportunity to slay Goliath? What is he doing? He's feeding sheep. He's delivering food, cheese, bread, grain. He is a delivery boy, anointed to be king. But he is a delivery boy. He is a delivery boy. We cannot forget that, because it says so much about his life and his story. Even this story is so steeped in the fact that he is a little shepherd boy who has no business being in this at all. At all. So he is a shepherd, message boy, food delivery, I guess you could say. And so, we continue. I want to jump down just a few verses to verse 25. Verse 25. Jump down just a bit. Nothing has happened of super note, but we're going to jump to 25. It says this. So the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Referring to Goliath. Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it should be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. Who wants to sign up for that? That sounds like pretty good. No taxes. That sounds great. You're gonna get you're gonna get a wife. You're gonna get a woman as a part of this, and you'll have riches. You'll have great things from this. Enrich with great riches. Give him his own daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. That's pretty nice, huh? That's pretty nice. And David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying this, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Now, I want to ask your permission for something, because as I'm reading this, I'm thinking of something else. Can I go off my notes this morning? I have another bonus message for you that's speaking to my heart right now that the Lord, I feel, is calling me to. In this story, we just talked about the great riches that could come from the king, that he will grant to someone who slays Goliath, right? Who gets them out of this mess. What does David actually get out of this, though? We just zoom out just a little bit. What does David actually gain from this? He gains riches. He would get a wife. We know David would have 8 wives, if not more, and that's not including his concubines. He would get riches. He would get many things. But really, what does he have to gain from this? Because David, you could say, oh, well, he wasn't in this for the riches. He said, how dare someone defy the armies of Israel and the God of Israel? It's all about who's defying God. It's about him doing a righteous thing. But God didn't call him to do anything about Goliath. Not as far as I've read the story. Feel free to do that and tell me where it says that. But I don't see God telling David, I want you to go be at this point and I want you to slay Goliath. Is it possible that David has a bit of an ego problem? David inserts himself in something that he has no business being a part of. He wasn't anointed to be a warrior. It does not say that when he's anointed. He's anointed to be king someday, but he's not anointed to go slay Goliath. He is not a warrior. He is a shepherd boy. And he'll talk about, his credentials and his experience. But what does he really have in this story doing at all? It makes no sense why he is there and what he is about to do. Notice David pushes himself in. He says, hey, that guy who's going to slay them, what's he going to get? What will they gain from this? I think that David has an ego problem just as much as Saul has an ego problem. I believe that they are both cut from the same cloth, so to say. And it will be a war between them of egos. And David has an ego problem. The reason why I think that is he inserts himself in this story. God didn't tell him to slay Goliath. He shows up. He asks what he can gain from it. God told him that he was going to be anointed to be king someday. He knew that he was anointed from Samuel. This happened. And I'll just say this. In my life, I have seen God move in miraculous ways. Period. And when I read the Bible, many times that God is about to do something miraculous, he makes it very clear. He says it. He calls someone. He puts it in plain Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic. He puts it in the Bible. And in my life, when God has moved in a very big way, it has been very obvious. I have known that that is what the Lord wants to do and what he's going to do from something. I don't see God moving in some way in calling David into what he is about to do. And so I just want to speak to you, and maybe just my own heart as I'm reading this story. I cannot tell you how much pain, anxiety, wasted time, hurt, serious hurt, and Natalie can testify. Some of the darkest moments of my life, the worst pains that I have felt, was me putting myself into a hat or into a ring that I had no reason putting my name into. When I've had a boss that I really don't like and I think I'm better than him and I say, I can do this better than you. And I fight to get his position. Or, let's talk about ministry. I'll just put it all on the table. There's a really well sought after church and I say, hey, have you considered me for this position? You laugh about it, but it's a thing. Where I say, oh, hey, what are they getting for this? Can I volunteer myself for this? This will raise my rank, my position, my honor. Maybe this will get where I already know I'm going quicker. David is anointed to be king. He does not. Saul is doing okay. He's healthy. The nation is fine for considered aspects right now. David is going to try and take a shortcut through slaying Goliath. And what will he actually get for slaying Goliath? For those of you who have read this story, what will he actually gain from doing this? You know what all it will do? Actually make things worse. He shortcuts into more years spent in pain. He loses the relationship that he might have with Saul. He gets himself into more trouble by putting himself into this situation, although God grants him success, does he slay Goliath? Yes. But you know what he also does? He is now directly on the map of Saul now, when he wasn't before. He will draw all eyes upon him by doing what he's doing, by saying, I'm anointed by God, I'm going to do this. Instead of God calling him in the steps that he has for his life. And he will now have to walk through years and years of distrust, of ego problems, of fear of his life, a shattered relationship with the current king who's not going anywhere for 15 years. Because he just thought, I'm David, let me push myself in. Because David does do it, and he can do it. And so I don't know if I'm just on my own there and sharing that, but for those of you who feel called, you feel talented in what you're doing, you want bigger station, you want a bigger job, you want a bigger responsibility, and you just want to push yourself and put your name in there and say, hey, I'm in here, what about me? I can do this. You might have success, but you know what happens when you have more success? It just presents you more problems. I've realized that very quickly. When you get more fame, you get more people, more eyes on you. When you get a bigger job, more responsibility. New levels, new devils. Every single time. And if you don't believe that or have experienced that, you don't know what I'm talking about, that you haven't been there. But when you elevate, it gets even harder. You're rewarded with more problems, more responsibility. That job that you wanted so bad that you think you're so much better at, congrats, you just worked yourself into an extra 20 hours, 30 hours a week. More responsibilities and a harder time. David, I believe, does that. Because of his ego, he pushes himself into what he did not need to do. A shortcut to king, and think again, it takes longer. Get on Saul's good side because he takes care of this guy for him? No. Now he is viewed as the savior of the country. And when other people, other than the king, are looked better than the king, that's not a good thing. Not a good thing. If you have an insecure boss or leader, and they don't like other people getting the attention, that's not going to be a good, safe workplace. I don't think David is going to have an easy time with this. And I don't see God necessarily calling him into this. So that's a free one for you that has plagued my life, and I hope it's for someone here. But that's my experience with that, especially for you young folk who are just going to, the society just tells you, higher, 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 ascend, keep going, keep pushing, keep doing better, try and be a millionaire by 30, whatever it is, 30 and 30. It will bring you so much grief and pain if you are moving not in what God has designed for you, in the time that he has designed for you. We have to submit to that. But I call it ego. Some people might call it confidence in God. So let's jump back to the story a little bit. David has confidence in God, in himself, but he has confidence in God. Is that not correct? Otherwise, he wouldn't be asking. Someone doesn't put themselves in a position that they know they're 100% going to lose. All right? We know that. We know that completely. We know that completely here. And so he wants to get involved. David said, okay, if this is what's going to be done for the man who kills him, what's going to happen? Read with me. We're in verse 28. He says it out loud. And people hear what David is saying, and they are not happy about it. This confidence, so-called, of David in verse 28. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was aroused against David, and he said, why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. His oldest brother sees it. I don't know if Eliab is seeing it correctly. We don't know that about this. But, I mean, he calls it out in him. David has other responsibilities that he has already been set by his father, which respect to your father is very important around that time. He is supposed to go there, deliver, check in, and go home. And now he is extending what he's actually supposed to be doing. Because he thinks he's meant for the palace, which he is. Sometimes when you know you're headed for the palace, it's really hard to stay in the mud. It's really hard to do that. Really hard to do that. For those of you, if your parents or someone ever said, man, you're destined for greatness, you're the best player on this team, you're going to go to the Olympic team someday. It's really hard to play with second-string players when you know you're destined for greatness. And David, once again, pushing himself in, is facing this backlash against him. But David, knowing his heart and knowing who David is this going to stop David? No, David In his heart, he has such a confidence and dependence and understanding, it is not going to stop David. And his oldest brother is not the only person who is going to hear about this. In verse 29, David said, "What have I done now? Is there not a cause?" Then he turned from him toward another and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first ones did. Now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul. Uh-oh, king knows now. Saul hears what David was going to say, and he sent for him. Then David goes and meets Saul, and he says to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." So ever since you were a youth tending to the pasture, he's been fighting in war. Since he was a kid, he's like a Spartan. He was raised to fight and kill and destroy. You have not even dabbled in it necessarily. So David goes, "Let me at him. Let me show him the power of God. Let me show him what I've got." And for those of you, especially for those young people here who show up saying, "Hey, I want to do something," I tell you, and I don't mean to discourage you, but you will likely immediately, when you say, "I want to do something great," someone is going to say, "Yeah, but you're too young. You don't know what you're doing. That's too much resources for us to give to that." Oh, even something that's like, "Oh, I want to open up a lemonade stand," or I want to do something. They're going to say, "It's a waste of time. You're too young. You don't know what you're doing. This isn't for you." You're going to face opposition, backlash. And those older folks, you know you've been there. Where you've been said, "Nope, you're not ready. Nope." Or you, God forbid, you might be the one who has told other people they can't do something. Although they feel called to it, they feel led to it, and they say, "I'm going to do this." And it immediately faces backlash. "Oh, you don't have enough training. You're not prepared for this. You can't do this. I don't think you can even do this possibly." Or no one does that. If you have a new idea, it's something completely new. Someone might say, "Well, that's just not how we do things." Has anyone ever heard that one? No, we don't do things like that here. That's not how we do things here. Well, just because it's never been done that way before does not mean it can't. Amen. Okay? So if you have a new idea and people just say, "Oh, you're crazy," maybe they're crazy for continuing to do it the same way forever, assuming that one thing works forever, always. Sometimes a new thing can be good. It just hasn't been done before, and that's a scary thing, and that's okay. And that's okay. Just because maybe you might be the first in your family to try and go to college does not mean you're not meant to go to college. It just might mean you might be the first. Coming up with a new idea at work doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. It might just be you're the only one who had the tenacity to try and share something like that with those you work with. You might be the first, the catalyst, the playmaker, so to say, in this story. So does this stop David? What Saul says to him, does it stop David? Would this stop you? I already know I've got some stubborn people here. Are you stubborn in the face of those telling you no and those telling you can't do something? If someone says, "I don't think you can do that," do we have any people in here who are then going to try and prove them wrong? Does anyone have that spirit in them? I see one in a couple who say, "Watch me do it." Actually, you know what? You better film it, because that would be even better. You don't think I can do something? I would love to show you how I do it. And I hope you film it so we have a record of it. Let's make a plaque, because this makes it all the more better. Because I was going to do it anyway. But now that you don't think I can, watch me. I'll show you how great I am. If anyone has ever heard that before, I'll show you how great I am. And so this doesn't stop David. David's response to the literal king is this in verse 34. But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from mouth. And when it rose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing as he has defied the armies of the living God." Moreover, David said this, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." You know, David he's got some spirit. He's got some tenacity. He's got some heart. He said, I've never slain a Philistine. I've never slain Goliath. I've never been in a war, but I have fought some battles. I might have not fought him, but I fought a bear. I may have never fought in war or ever wore armor in my entire life. But I remember when a bear came and I slayed that to protect my sheep. So he said, I might not have experience in the way that you're thinking, but I do have some experience. It's just not in the way that you would like. And that happens all the time. See, David was running around his field. He knew something about this. He knew something about this. And he said, your servant will go and fight this Philistine. Is he asking Saul for permission to go fight Goliath? He doesn't say that. He says, I will go fight this Philistine. He's not asking permission. He's already made up in his mind. See, that's where I see a little bit of the ego come in. He doesn't even ask the king, hey, can I have permission to go be the champion of our nation to go fight Goliath? And if I lose, the entire nation is now subject to them. He doesn't ask permission. He says, this is what I'm going to do. It would be great to have your blessing, but I'm going either way. I'm a man on a mission, and this is my mission. I don't know if all of you, if some of you say you relate to David, do you still relate to David? You don't ask permission, you ask for forgiveness later on. You say, I am going to do this. Wives, try not to look at your husbands too hard. You're going to have a conversation in the car after church. This is not a request. This is a declaration. David is so steeled in his heart that this is what he's going to do. He's relentless. He has tenacity. He says, I will not stop until I've done what I've come here to do. And he tries and backs it up from his own life and what experience he's had so far. And so Saul says, go, and the Lord be with you. Which we know the Lord is with him, but only in a distressing way. So that's always funny when, he says, go, and the Lord be with you. The Lord will be with David. Maybe not so much in the way that Saul thinks with himself. So we continue reading. We're in verse 38. So what does Saul and David do? David's going to go fight this battle. Saul clothed David with his own armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor. He tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. He can't even walk in them. That's how bad it is. Not just, it doesn't feel right. He can't even walk in them. So David took them off. Have you ever stopped to think, why isn't Saul fighting Goliath? I mean, we already shared with you that they prayed that they would have a king who would rule them, but then a king who would fight for them and win their battles. Why is Saul not fighting Goliath? What? He's not meant to be king. That doesn't stop people anyway. There's people who aren't meant to be bosses, but it doesn't stop them from being bosses, presidents, leaders, pastors. Just because someone's not meant to doesn't stop people. People do things ignorantly all the time. That's just my perspective. But yeah, that's one reason. Why isn't Saul fighting Goliath? He's afraid? Okay. We can do things afraid, though. What? Someone said he's a chicken? He's a chicken? He's got feathers. I'll tell you, it makes no sense why Saul's not fighting this battle. Because Saul has had experience in some ways. In those 3 chapters we skipped over, he has fought. Saul has won. Saul has fought battles. He wasn't randomly chosen as king. The only reason it went wrong, he was supposed to have never-ending kingdom. Remember, don't get this wrong. Saul is not a terrible guy at this part of the story. He disobeyed God. But when he was chosen, he was great. He was going to have a never-ending kingdom. God even told him, he said, your kingdom would have never had an end if you did not disobey me. He got lost in the sauce, so to say, along the way. Saul should be out on the field fighting this battle. And so I will just tell you, how much do you have appreciation if you have a leader who will not even fight a battle, who is supposed to be fighting the battle? A king is supposed to be fighting the battle. In this time, he was supposed to be fighting this battle. At least leading the charge. If you have a boss who won't take responsibility for something but has it handed off to you to break the bad news, it's like a boss who doesn't do the firing but does all the hiring, and they hand it off to one of you and say, hey, can you go fire these people? Why is that my job? Why is that my responsibility? And so Saul is looking for someone to fight a battle that he is supposed to be fighting. And so, Isn't it weird that Saul takes his own armor that he should be using to fight this battle and gives it to someone else to fight? It's Saul's armor to fight, and he gives it to someone else to do what he's not doing himself. And isn't that the way it always is, isn't it? Someone who is too afraid to do something, too afraid to start a business, to do something, to follow their own dreams, or failed at their dreams. And then when someone comes up that you know, your child or your friend or someone says, I have this dream. And they say, oh, well, here's what I did. Here, take this. But they're a failure. Why would David want anything from Saul when Saul should be out on the field fighting this battle? So Saul is giving to David something that is not working for him, expecting that it'll work for David. Why would it? It's meant for Saul. And Saul's failing at what he's doing, by the way. So maybe we shouldn't be taking advice from people who have failed at what you're about to go ahead and do in that way. He's saying, here, take this. It worked for me. How is it working for Saul now? It's not working at all. So why is he passing it down to him? It's not a blessing. It's not a blessing to him. And so I just want to warn some of you, when someone says, here, use this is how you should do it, but they've never been down that road themselves, you have nothing to gain from them. If your career ambitions are towards being a performer or performing artist, and someone who's never ever even been in the industry tries to tell you what to do, how you can make it that way, why? If I were a soldier and my platoon leader has never seen combat and he's saying, here's what we need to do when we get to combat. I want someone who knows, who's been in combat, who knows what's going to happen when the first bullet flies. I don't want my mechanic telling me how to fix my car who only rides a bike. It's that simple, folks. Saul is so embarrassingly passing on a dead product to someone to go fight something that he's too afraid to go fight himself. The armor's not working for him. Why would it work for David? It's embarrassing. And apply that to whatever field you want to talk about. Because there's things that people even worked for them a century ago, and they're still passing it off as if it works. It still doesn't work. It's not working. And I don't even want to tell you about what that's like being a pastor when pastors who haven't pastored in 50 years try and tell you how to pastor. Back in my day. What do you mean back in your day? You haven't pastored in 50 years. We have computers now. We have TVs. We have radio. We have streaming. Don't even get on how our translations have improved over the past 50 years. Mercy. If there are people who are trying to pass you off something that's not working for them but expecting it'll work for you, just accept it and say, hey, thanks, and then just push it to the side, because God needs people who are going to be entrepreneurial about making changes in the world, not just taking. Don't get me wrong, don't disrespect older generations. But if something died for them and has not been working, you don't need something that is dead when you're starting something that needs life. Do we understand that? Okay. Thank you. So he wasn't fighting Goliath. But here's the problem here. I was reading a book recently. So Goliath was already out on the battlefield for how long? We already read it. 40 days. That's an easy guess because most things are 40 days in the Bible. It was 40 days. Is Goliath going to go away on his own? So what does that mean? Goliath must fall. Some way or another, Goliath must fall. Is that not true? So Goliath is in the way, he's not going away, and he must fall one way or another. For those of you, you might feel you have something of a Goliath in your life, and I will tell you, if it's truly a Goliath, not just a wall, not just an opposition, not just critique, not just feedback, not just a closed door, I'm talking about Goliath. A big, green, scary monster that is in your way that will not go away. And it continues to rear its ugly head and stops you in your tracks every step of the way. If there is a Goliath truly that will not go away, it must fall then. And how do you kill Goliath? See, we can problem solve. If you come and talk with me about a problem you're going through, we're going to problem solve. We're going to talk about, hey, have you tried this? What have you done? What experience do you have? Is there anyone we can ask for help? What resources do you need? Do you need education? Do you need to learn something? Can we pray through it? Can we fast through it? What can we do to overcome this problem? That's the difference between a problem and a Goliath. Sometimes, truly, if you ignore a problem, it does go away. If it's just a problem. But what if it's a Goliath? Goliath is not going away. And the longer it is there, the longer it will hurt your life. See, I tried that with my alcoholism for a long time. And with my drug addiction. Wonder how easy it is to just say, hey, maybe it'll go away someday. Try that with cancer. Try that with diseases. Try that with clinical depression. Oh, it'll go away someday. No, that's a Goliath. That you can't just say, if I ignore it, I can pretend it's not there. You can't pretend that that is not there. You can pretend. But you can't just go on with your daily life assuming everything in the world is okay when everyone else looks at you or sees this massive Goliath in the way. Goliaths must fall. And those I'm preaching to who have a Goliath in your way, in your life, it has to go down. And you can't use Saul's armor. That's a waste of time. And you might even lose your life for it. You might lose your job for it. You might lose credibility. You might lose a relationship over it. So you don't have armor to go off of people who've done it before. And it's not going away. Goliath must fall. Goliath must fall. And I'm here today to tell some of you have been trying to do it someone else's way for a long time and it's not working for you. It's okay. You can take Saul's armor off. You don't have to use his stuff just because he gave it to you and he's done it a long time before. You are allowed to invent new ways to do things. You are allowed to try it your way. Is that okay if I give you that blessing? You are allowed to do things your way. Just because someone else gave it to you does not mean you need to do it that way. Armor yourself and wield the weapons that are comfortable to you and that God has uniquely blessed you with. As we're seeing in this story, David was a shepherd boy. He was not a warrior. He's not going to use warrior's tools to accomplish something when he has never been a warrior. Don't hand me a basketball and expect me to save the planet by making a three-pointer if I've never shot a basket before. I'm not a basketball player. So David is not going to fight like Saul, and Saul's a loser anyway. Continuing the story, we're in verse 40. Stay with me. Let's speed up. Let's pick up the pace here. Then he took his staff in his hand, talking about David after he took Saul's armor off, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, a little river right by there, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had with him because he's a shepherd. And his sling was in his hand, which he would use, and he drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. They're walking one-on-one like a movie. And the man who bore the shield went before him, shield bearer. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth. Young people, you are going to be disdained just because of what you look like or your age, having nothing to do with your talents or gifts or your unique qualities. Be ready for it. We've all experienced it. But don't be dismayed or discouraged from it. That's also in the Word of God. For he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Wow, that's a bit crazy. But that's war. Goliath is a grown man, a giant. David is a small boy, maybe 15, 16 years old. Child. You will be mocked. You will be challenged, especially if you walk up to the plate like David. Don't think this is sunshine and roses. We talk about, we do have kids reenact the story of David and Goliath, but this is a battlefield. It stank. There was blood. This was a battlefield. And Goliath is scary. And David is in this, but it does not mean that it's just a walk through the field with roses. This is a battle. You need to know who you are and be true to who God has made you to be in the face of a Goliath. God has created you to be someone unique with unique talents and gifts. David was a shepherd, and that is what he is sticking to and believing that God will pull him through. And so verse 45, David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. For those who were here a few weeks ago, when we talked about the book of Chronicles, the battle is not yours, but mine, the Lord says. And in that case, they did not even have to lift a weapon to win a battle. This is a different story, but the same principle is true. The Lord will fight this battle. The Lord will deliver in this case. And you'll notice, where does David's confidence come from? When he talks about his confidence, we talk about David is confident. What does he say? He said, man, I'm good looking. I've got this. Is that what he says? Does he say, I've been a great warrior. I've got this? No. What does he say? What is his confidence in, and his confidence alone in? God. You can be confident. But the Lord tells you what to be confident if you're to be confident. I tell you all the time, have confidence. But I'm not talking about confidence in you. I'm talking about confidence in the only thing that can weather every single storm. We've got some powerful people in this church. You can be confident, but not in yourself, no matter how powerful you think you truly are, how great you truly think you are. Your confidence must come, and confidence only and alone must come from the Lord, who he has created you to be, who he has raised you, the experiences that he has brought you through, the training, the life that he has led you through, the people he has brought you to, the places that you have seen. You must rely on your confidence in God. And that is truly how David doesn't kill a Goliath, but can face a Goliath. Because you have to win a battle, you have to look the enemy in the eye sometimes. You can't defeat Goliath by walking away or calling him bad names. Sometimes you need to fight it. Sometimes you don't. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Sometimes you don't have to lift your hand and you need to give this over to God. But we're talking about a Goliath that will not go away, and you need to take matters into your own hands. And so he looks him in the eye. He calls him and says, the battle is the Lord's. He will truly win this battle this day. And verse 48, here we go. So it was, when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. He ran to the enemy. Then David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead. He fell on his face to the earth. And David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. David did not win this battle using anyone else's tools other than his own. He did not use anyone else's military prowess. He didn't use their skills. He didn't use their ideas. He actually did what everyone would laugh at, which he literally was laughed at. We don't really talk about that all the time. Because for us, even in church, we have a great attraction towards telling people this is how you do things. And it's anathema to do anything other than tradition tells us to. And I say that as a pastor in a religion that is very steeped in tradition. It's all about tradition. Sometimes tradition fails us. Sometimes tradition fails us. That we are so held to the tradition that we forget to see what is actually in front of us and neglect the fact that things change sometimes. And things certainly changed. Especially for a people who, let me remind you, a lot has happened with them and God in the previous chapters. God has saved them from a whole lot. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, we talked about Chronicles, which is not that long before this story. God literally saved them from a 3-on-1 army battle without raising their hands. And they all killed each other. Great miracle. Somehow they forget that in the face of a Goliath. Some Goliaths in battles in your life, you know what their greatest power will be? Is to make you think it's all on your own. One of the greatest deceptions of evil and the devil and in battles and Goliaths in your life will be to make you feel like you have to do it on your own. Every time. And you know what would be great? If you only leaned on who you are. If you said, oh, I'm confident. You know, I've done this a little bit. I can do this. I can take care of this. That's a great deception by the evil one, who wants you to believe that you can do everything on your own. And isn't that what's popular now? You can do it. You can manifest it. You can just close your eyes and believe, and it will happen. And you can do this. Everything that you ever need is already inside of you. You can do all things through you, who strengthens you and gives to you. That's what our society is. And if it's not, you're not in society. Everything is through you. You can do all things. Period. That is a great deception. Power, true power, great power that is needed to slay Goliath, who will not move the way, can only and does only come through the Lord. Amen. And that's the only way or place that you're going to get it. And so one moment, and some of you who are praying for an opportunity for a Goliath, I know some of you are praying for a Goliath, so you can prove yourself, and you can elevate yourself, you can get a promotion, and you can get prestige, that you're saying, I'm ready for my Goliath moment. I've been in the fields, I'm ready, give me my Goliath. I've been waiting to be noticed. I'm ready to do this. Am I the only one that's ever thought about that? I'm ready to prove myself. Has anyone been ready to prove himself and said, when's my big assignment going to come? Maybe I'm the only one with that problem then. Okay, well, I'll just preach to myself. One time, I was praying, someday I'm going to get my shot. Is no one else desperate enough like I am? Man, sometimes, especially as a teenager, every night I prayed, I want my shot. Maybe that's because I wanted to make it on Broadway, and I also wanted to be a professional this and that, but no one's ever prayed that. I want my shot. Someone to notice me, and I'm going to do great things. I'm not just joking here. I'm speaking to the depths of your heart, the dreams that some of you older folk have given up on, that you said, I'm ready for my shot. Notice, David's shot only comes, how does he end up being able to defeat Goliath? He was following the little deliveries of serving cheese to his brothers near the battlefield. Those of you who are fighting day and night, praying, I want to get my shot. I want to fight a Goliath. I'm a little scrappy. I want to get my shot. I want to prove something for my God or for my life. David only ends up on the battlefield getting an opportunity to fight Goliath because he was diligent in the little things like delivering bread and cheese. Some of you need to learn to serve faithfully in the little before you might get great. And I've had to learn that the hard way in my life, every step of the way. Because it's really easy to say, I'm going to take this shortcut. I don't need the little stuff. Give me the big stuff. That sets you up for failure. It sets you up for pain. And the reality is, David only got this opportunity by being faithful to his father in something very little. And might I remind you, David was anointed to be king already. I'm telling you right now, maybe I've got an ego problem. I'm just going to keep preaching. If I was anointed to be king and someone told me to deliver bread and cheese to my brothers on the battlefield, I quit. Am I preaching to real people this morning? If you are destined for greatness and someone tells you to go back and take care of the poop on the field with the sheep, you've disgraced me. I am meant to be king. But you see, David serves and he does it. And then he gets this opportunity. Some of you are skipping the duties of the little stuff, of running in the field, of facing the bear, of facing the lion, and thinking your very first assignment is Goliath. You don't pray for a Goliath. You kill a Goliath if you meet it while you're already serving. Well, Goliath was just in the way. He didn't want Goliath there. He just said, my path is going this way, and if you're in my way, I'm going to kill you. We laugh, but that's what this was. David was serving. He saw it. He took it down. Maybe it's just for one person this morning. I know you're waiting for something big. Start with the small. It'll come. Be faithful in what you would call the small, the menial tasks of life. And I promise, then it will come. Be faithful in the little, and then you can receive much. I promise you. Because taking shortcuts, before we go into next week, David, because of what he does today, is a blessing and a curse. David's life will never be the same once he slays Goliath, nor will yours if you slay Goliath in your life. I promise you, and we're coming to an end. I want to tell you, you have to decide for yourself, is it worth you taking on this battle and this war against this Goliath in your life? David did not need to. It had to go down, but God didn't tell him to take it down. He decided to. I tell you, if you truly Use the tools and gifts that God has given you in a different way, maybe not a sword, but a sling, your own slingshot, whatever your gifts and talents and unique created by God abilities and uniqueness are. When you slay that Goliath, your life will never be the same the moment onward. Because you've tasted that battle. You've slain Goliath. You are now on the radar. Saul didn't know David was meant to be king. He loved David. I don't think David is going to be able to live in obscurity the moment he kills a Goliath. And so I'm telling some of you today, you may be dreaming of the moment when you get to have your victory moment, your Rocky moment, and put your hands up and have slayed Goliath. Or David, when he slays the head and holds the head up high, and he says, I slayed Goliath. Congratulations, David. Your life just got worse. It does. Years and years and years for this beautiful Goliath moment of the children's story we say all the time actually gets him more problems, more issues, more things in his life. But I'll tell you what, I don't want to end on a somber note. The beauty is that Goliath did have to fall, and David, through this journey, we learned so much, and that we ourselves know what is up ahead for us as we go forward. So believe this, God truly has called each and every one of you. I truly believe that, and I believe the word is true about that. Allow God to use you in your unique ways of your abilities and talents and gifts that God has specifically given you. They might not be like other people or even people you look up to, but you can have power in your own uniqueness to pick up the slingshot, your own slingshot, whatever that might be, and fight that battle. And be prepared. Don't lose your guard, and do not forget that when you've slain the Goliath, there's more things coming your way, especially evil. If you slay a great powerful evil in your life, there's more coming after it. You're now on the radar. You're now a warrior. You're now fighting for the living God. He will continue to protect you. He will continue to care for you and guide you. And we see that, and we will see that over the next few weeks and months as we continue through David's life. But let this be a testament for our lives today. If the Goliath is in our path, and God has called us and is pushing us forward through it, come what may, the Lord's will be done. We will fight for him a valiant battle. He will fight with us, and we will have victory. Does anyone want victory this morning? Amen. Is anyone confident that we can have victory through Jesus? Amen. What about victory through yourself? No. Victory through Jesus, through your unique self, as you serve humbly in the sticks, the weeds, the far-off countries, wherever God leads you. And I promise he will bestow his great many blessings upon each and every one of you, young and old. Praise God.